We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Liberal Party I lead will always champion policies to help more Australians into a home of their own. But under Labor, the home ownership dream has never been further out of reach. The Prime Minister promised to deliver 1.2 million homes, but he has let down young Australians by delivering just 17. With leaked Treasury advice confirming this is a broken promise, will the Prime Minister abandon his failing policies and work constructively with the Coalition to address Labor's housing crisis?
The Minister for Housing. It is the first question of this term. Trust me, do not interject before a minister, including the Prime Minister, has begun their answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, there is a housing minister for the LNP from Queensland called Sam O'Connor. This is what he had to say. A major milestone has been reached with construction underway on one of the Gold Coast's largest social and affordable housing projects. The high-rise, supportive housing project is being delivered by the Australian Government's Housing Australia Future Fund. Went on to say,
Order.
Importantly, this project will provide 200 vulnerable Gold Coast households with much more than a safe and secure roof over their heads. The Master Builders Australia support our programs. Danita Warren, the 1.2 million homes we say is achievable. For the first time, we've seen a federal government actually recognise that they've got a leadership role in resolving this problem. Up until the Albanese government, we have seen federal government say no, it's the problem of the states, it's the problem of local government. Who might Danita Warren have been speaking about? The former government that over the 9 long years didn't bother to have a housing minister for half of the time, had complete contempt for public housing, provided no incentives for... And
the Leader of the Opposition has asked her question. I'm just going to ask her, now that she's been given the courtesy of her question being heard in silence, that she directs the same courtesy to the Prime Minister.
The Property Council of Australia, Mike Zorbas, Chief Executive, the 5-year national housing target is already a success. There is currently an outbreak of nationally coordinated political leadership and productivity on planning and housing, something we have not seen so far this century and would not have seen without the Accord. I mean, all these people, the Housing Industry Association as well, went on to say we're seeing the right conversations taking place and funding announcements made. Mr Speaker, when you inherit a decade of neglect, you put in place the investments, you put in place the construction, you put in place the refurbishments, delivering 55,000 social and affordable homes, our $43 billion Homes for Australia plan, 100,000 homes for sale only to first home buyers, 5% deposits for all first home buyers. The Help to Buy shared equity scheme, remember that, was only passed last December because the coalition held it up for 3 years.
Order. Prime Minister will refer to the coalition as the coalition. Oh, collective term. Order. Give a call to the honourable member for Dixon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real and lasting cost of living relief, particularly for young Australians, students and apprentices?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Dixon for her questioning. Can I congratulate her on what was an extraordinary first speech in this chamber last night. It was a privilege to be here, and I think that it will go down as one of the great speeches, a great beginning to what I'm sure will be a long career as the member for Dixon. Today we are cutting student debt by 20% with the legislation that we've introduced. We announced it last December. We said it would be the first piece of legislation that we would introduce were we to be re-elected. And one of the reasons why we sit on this side of the chamber is because of this policy, because it resonated with those young Australians in particular who are looking for intergenerational equity measures, which is what this is, saving some 3 million Australians an average of $5,500 each. But of course, those opposite said they would oppose this, and they went through the election campaign with one of the big distinctions between the Labor government and the opposition being that we wanted to provide that cost of living help like we did throughout the last term, and consistent with what they did in the last term, they opposed every single measure. This helps not just people who are university graduates, but about 280,000 apprentices who've got vocational education as well. And it's just one of the measures. We didn't wait for Parliament to come back before we started delivering on our cost of living agenda. On July 1, paid prac for student nurses, teachers, social workers and midwives began. Now, I think that most people would have thought, well, if you're studying to be a nurse or you're studying to be a teacher, and these are professions that are in short supply, we would want to encourage people to go down that career path, that when they took the time out in a hospital or in an aged care facility or in a school, that they would actually have to leave their part-time jobs. It would actually cost them money to do paid prac. Well, under this government from July 1, that was fixed. Just like the $10,000 bonuses for construction workers, just like the free TAFE, just like the 2 weeks of paid parental leave, we're super paid on it for the first time. An additional 2 weeks, taking it up to 24 weeks, it'll go to 26 next year. Superannuation guarantee went to 12%. The $150 energy bill relief began. A 3.5% wage increase for minimum wage workers, and the subsidy for batteries began as well, already undertaken by 10,000 households.
Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Under Labor's tax policy, Australians will be forced to find cash they don't have to pay tax on income they haven't earned. Prime Minister, it takes a lot to unite Paul Keating and John Howard, but both are totally against this unfair tax. Will the Prime Minister abandon his plans to work with the Greens and instead join me, the crossbench, Paul Keating and John Howard, to reject this unfair tax?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much. Well, tax was an issue at the last election. It was an issue on May the 3rd. And in the budget brought down by the Treasurer in March, we had not one tax cut but 2 tax cuts. And we brought forward the legislation before this Parliament, and we passed it on the Wednesday, and then it went through the Senate as well later that day. So as a direct result of the actions that we have taken, we will see income tax cuts for all 14 million taxpayers, following up from the income tax cuts that we delivered last July for all 14 million taxpayers, delivered on July 1 next year, and then a further tax cut the year after, on July 1 the year after. Now, that is action that we took, and today, of course, Parliament has begun. We've had our first piece of legislation was to assist people by putting more dollars in their pockets with the 20% cut in student debt, delivering benefits on average of $5,500. But had we not been successful on May the 3rd, we know what the first piece of legislation was going to be. Because, remarkably, those opposite went to an election saying that they would actually introduce legislation to increase income taxes, for every single Australian taxpayer by increasing that first marginal tax rate, not once but twice.
Prime Minister will pause and the Leader of the Opposition will take her point of order.
It's a point of order on relevance, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister is not addressing the particular tax that he knows. I am asking about the superannuation tax. The tax that we referred to in the question is not being addressed by the Prime Minister.
Order. I know where the Leader of the Opposition is coming from. She was talking about a policy topic about a tax that wasn't mentioned specifically. The Prime Minister was asked about under the government's tax policy. So just remind the Leader of the Opposition you can't bring new material into the point of order. I understand her point of order. She's trying to get the Prime Minister to talk about a specific topic, but the name of the tax would be helpful for future questions. And I'll just make sure that we deal with this issue of relevance, and I just remind all members on page 567 of practice about direct relevance. We're not getting into bad habits early, but I'm generally making sure ministers and the Prime Minister refer to the policy topic, and he'll need to refine his remarks regarding the tax policy he was asked about.
I'm certainly talking about tax policy, and that was what I was asked about, and our tax policy is pretty clear. We want people to earn more, and we want more to keep more of what they earn. That's our policy of those opposite. Those opposite, the Liberal and National Party, went to the election on May the 3rd calling for higher taxes and bigger deficits. That is what their platform was at the election. And no wonder that there's a vacancy down there, Mr Speaker, because those opposite were rejected because Australians do want to earn more, and they want to keep more of what they earn, and that is what we will deliver.
When the House comes to order, the member hasn't been called yet. Order. When the House comes to order, then there is silence. The member for Melbourne shall be heard.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to help Australians with student debt?
Give a call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the magnificent member for Melbourne for her question and congratulate her on her fantastic first speech last night and her incredible victory in the electorate of Melbourne. Mr Speaker, there are more people in the electorate of Melbourne with a student debt today than anywhere else in the country. 35,000 people, almost 1 in 3 voters. And on the 3rd of May, they made their voices heard.
The member for Gippsland will cease interjecting.
This morning, I had the privilege to introduce the first bill into this new parliament, the bill that will cut their student debt by 20%. And not just them. It'll cut the student debt of 20,000 people in the electorate of Dixon, 34,000 people in the electorate of Brisbane, 21,000 people in the electorate of my good mate, the member for Banks, 28,000 people in the electorate of Grainler, and 26,000 people in my electorate of Blaxland. And right across the country, all up, more than 3 million Australians nationwide. The average HECS debt today, is about 27 grand, so that means, as the PM just said, an average debt cut of about 5.5 grand. That's a lot of help for a lot of people just out of uni, just getting started. Help them to buy a home, thinking about starting a family. It'll just make life for them a little bit easier. And this bill also does something else. It also cuts the minimum annual repayments that Australians with a student debt have to make every year. For someone on an income of $70,000, it will reduce their minimum repayments that they have to make each year by $1,300. That's real help with the cost of living. That's more money in their pocket, an extra $1,300, rather than the government's. Mr Speaker, on the 3rd of May, as I said, Australians made their voices heard. They voted for tax cuts. They voted for free TAFE. They voted for more urgent care clinics. They voted for the biggest investment in Medicare ever to make it easier to see a doctor for free. And they voted for this, for a 20% cut in the student debt of 3 million Australians. And today we introduced the legislation to make that happen.
The call to the honourable member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment. One of the first acts of this government was to approve the extension to the North West Gas Project, locking in billions of tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions out past this century. Whenever she has made unpopular decisions in the previous term, the Minister for the Environment said she was simply following the law. Minister, you are the law. When will the pro-fossil fuel Albanese government stop gaslighting the Australian public and implement the changes it has long promised on our environmental reforms?
Order. The members on my right will cease interjecting. It's far too much noise during that question. I'll give the call to the Minister for the, representing the Minister for the Environment and Water and the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for Bradfield and congratulate her on her election as well. The first thing to say with respect to the North West Shelf is there are two sets of legal provisions. There are the legal provisions that we've made on environmental law, which go to a range of environmental treaties. That's their basis, and that are handled by the Minister for the Environment. And there's a series of other pieces of legislation handled by the Minister for Climate Change that make sure that we are doing what the government has said we will do with respect to emissions. The project on the North West Shelf that the member for Bradfield refers to is subjected to both. So in terms of the impact on climate change, it is subject to the safeguards mechanism. It's subject to the safeguards mechanism because it's a high-emitting project. The laws that we've passed with respect to climate change apply to that project. But at the same time, when the Environment Minister considers environmental law, that's where they consider a series of other issues, including threatened species and, in this case, quite specifically, having to consider issues around heritage and, in particular, issues relating to rock art. There are specific conditions that the proposed decision — at the moment it's a proposed decision, the final decision hasn't come down — but the Environment Minister has put forward a proposed decision. And with respect to the concerns about potential impact on the nearby rock art, there are strict conditions on air emissions which have been put forward in that proposed decision. So in terms of the impact on climate change, it's affected by the other legislation we've put in place. And in terms of the heritage impact, it's affected specifically by the EPBC Act, what's known as our environmental legislation. The member would be aware of the different things that have been said already by the government, and particularly by the Environment Minister, in terms of the work that the government is doing, both with industry stakeholders and with environmental groups, to try to make sure that we can bring environmental law reform together in this term. That negotiation is happening, that work is happening, because at the moment, until we're able to get environmental laws that are fit for purpose, we have a situation where no one wins in terms of business wants to be able to make sure it can get decisions in a timely way. And from the environment perspective, we want to make sure we're better able to protect our precious environment and our Australian heritage. The Minister has made clear that that work is being done, and it's being done by the government.
Give a call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, how are Medicare urgent care clinics making it easier for Australians to see a doctor when they need to and where they need to?
Great question.
Give a call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for the National Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker. And to the new member for Griffith, can I say congratulations on your election and on an absolutely terrific first speech last night. And thank you for the energy with which you sold our government's plan to strengthen Medicare, for more doctors, for more nurses, for more bulk billing, for more urgent care clinics and for even cheaper medicines. And your background as a leader of the mental health organisation, the Kookaburra Kids Foundation, made you absolutely the right person, along with Senator Wong, to announce our government's commitment to expanding the Gidget Foundation Centre's support for perinatal mental health as well. But I was especially delighted in early March, Mr Speaker, to join the now member for Griffith at the Medicare Urgent Care Clinic in Woolloongabba, the South Brisbane Medicare Urgent Care Clinic. That's one of 87 clinics we established last term. We promised 50, we delivered 87, all open 7 days a week, extended hours, fully bulk billed, and more than 1.7 million Australians have already gone through one of those 87 clinics, Mr Speaker, including 23,000 in South Brisbane. Around a third of those patients, Mr Speaker, are kids under the age of 15, like Natasia's 4-year-old daughter who went to the South Brisbane Urgent Care Clinic after an accident at Kindy. She said in her Google review, Natasia did, that Anna, the receptionist, was terrific, that Kirsty, the nurse, was, and I quote, the most generous and patient nurse I've ever encountered, and she was a bit of a rap for Dr John as well, Mr Speaker. She said that we were there for less than an hour and left with all the information we need and a little lady who was all bandaged up. This clinic bulk bills and validates parking. I think it's the first clinic I've heard of doing that as well. It's a testament. It never stops getting better, Mr Speaker. It's a testament to public health. I'm so grateful for the experience we had. Now, Mr Speaker, at the last election we promised 50 more of these urgent care clinics, including one in Greenslopes, the other end of the member's electorate. Expressions of interest have already opened for some of those clinics, Mr Speaker. We've committed to all 50 being open in this financial year, but I'm doing everything I can to get as many open as I can before Christmas, Mr Speaker, because, as the Minister for Education and the Prime Minister have said, we are so focused on delivery. We are so focused on repaying the trust shown to us by the Australian people, including around our plan to keep strengthening Medicare. Our expanded urgent care clinic will mean that 80% of the Australian population live within a 20-minute drive of an urgent care clinic. They'll be looking after 2 million patients each and every year, every single one of whom will be bulk billed. It is absolutely a core part of our plan to strengthen Medicare.
Call to the Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Treasurer. Can the Assistant Treasurer clarify how Labor's super tax on unrealised capital gains would operate for a farmer who has their farm held in a self-managed superannuation fund when they've had a failed season with no income?
Call to the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the Leader of the National Party for the question. I would like to firstly state that it's important, I think, to go back to the purpose of superannuation when we consider this important reform. Superannuation was a very important reform brought in the early 1990s, and it was for the purpose of providing dignity and certainty in retirement for people across the Australian population. That is an extremely important piece of context, because this reform that we are talking about is very important in improving the sustainability and the fairness of the superannuation system. I would also like to add that this reform is a reform that will only apply to around 0.5% of member balances. It is going to be a reform that applies only to balances of $3 million or more, balances which are well above what is needed for people to achieve dignity and certainty in retirement. I also want to stress, Speaker, that this reform will still provide concessional tax treatment for that part of the balances over $3 million.
Goldstein will cease interjecting.
It will provide tax.
Order. The Minister will just... Whoever's interjecting can cease so I can hear the Leader of the Nationals on his point of order.
Speaker, just a point of order on relevance. There's been a preamble, but the question was very specific about how a farmer would pay for this tax. very specific. We've been very fair, but I think we need to get to the thrux of the answer.
Yeah, and as I indicated when the Leader of the Opposition took her point of order, the question was specific, and we're not getting into a situation where a minister or the Prime Minister or whoever's directed the question is on the policy topic, is explaining to the House about, in this case, the tax. We're not simply going to get up every time and disrupt question time, and this is a warning to everyone, otherwise I won't take the points of order. I can give you loads of examples of where this has happened before, but we're starting on the right foot. Just because the minister isn't giving a fact, a figure, a yes or no, as I was clear in the last parliament, we're not simply going to get people up and say, on points of relevance, he's not answering the question or she's not answering the question. If you need further information, go to page 567 of practice, which clearly articulates the area of relevance. The minister is talking about the tax. He's explaining to the House the details of the tax. I can appreciate it's not the answer that you want, but I can't direct him to answer it in a way that you would like. I can only direct him to make him relevant. If he strays into other policy, he'll be called into order. The Minister in continuation.
Thank you, Speaker. So can I just reiterate that this is a very modest measure which is well targeted at supporting the fairness and sustainability of the superannuation sector. Can I also say that in relation to the specific question that was raised, that it is important that all superannuation funds designed so as to take account of diversification requirements and liquidity requirements. That is an obligation under the current law on all superannuation funds. So that is something very important to bear in mind. It is important also to bear in mind that if an SMSF has a farm or a business within the fund, that it should be receiving commercial arm's-length payments from that business or from that farm. Speaker, can I just conclude by saying that this is a very modest measure. This measure has been on the public books for well over 2 years. It was consulted on very broadly, and we took this measure to the last election. I certainly won't be taking lectures on the fairness of the superannuation system from a party that has opposed every single increase in the superannuation guarantee over the last 25 years.
The member for Cunningham will cease interjecting, and the member for Gippsland can give it a rest too. Order. I'd like to hear from the honourable member for Brisbane.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government getting on with the job of delivering a fairer, better energy system, as well as acting on climate change? Is the government being asked to consider any other proposals?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. I enjoyed campaigning with her during the election campaign on multiple occasions, and I said before the election she'd be a wonderful member of parliament, and I say after the election she's a very welcome member of parliament in this House, Mr Speaker. And on May the 3rd, the Australian people gave the Albanese government a clear instruction to keep on going. To keep on going with the task of building a better energy system for our country, Mr Speaker, and that's exactly what we intend to do. And I'm pleased that overnight we saw new figures showing that the financial year just ended was a record for renewable energy investment, double the financial year before, more than 4 gigawatts of new renewable energy connected. This is actually energy that is up and running and connected to the system today, and that is a good thing. And we're also getting on with the job of delivering our cheaper home batteries policy, which we sought a mandate from the Australian people for, Mr Speaker. And as the Prime Minister said before, we didn't wait for Parliament to sit. This came into force on the 1st of July. And I'm happy to give the House an update that today, 3 weeks after it came into force today, an update even from yesterday for the House, 11,045 households across Australia have taken advantage of the cheaper home batteries policy, Mr Speaker, saving their energy bills and reducing their emissions. And this is a policy we designed for the suburbs and regions of Australia. We designed it for those people, Mr Speaker, in the suburbs and regions. And I'm pleased to share with the House where this policy is being taken up the most, Mr Speaker. It will be of some interest to the House. Which postcode has taken up the cheaper homes batteries policy the most, Mr. Speaker, in all of Australia. It's 2570, Camden in the electorate of Hume, Mr. Speaker. The electorate which is most embracing of the Albanese government's cheaper home batteries policy, showing we're getting on the job. But the member for Brisbane asked us if we're being asked to consider any alternatives, and I'm sorry to say we are. We are, Mr. Speaker. I've been given a copy of the Coalition's anti-net zero bill. I'm not sure if the Leader of the Opposition has seen one, but I have. It came into my possession. That's going to be moved by the member for New England. We saw the member for New England, the new dream team, the dream couple, the member for New England, the member for Riverina, are out there this morning backing each other in. The member for Riverina said on the Kieran Gilbert show, "We're virile and we're out there," he said. The member for New England and the member for Riverina. Now, this is not his Tinder profile. This is his dream ticket. This is his dream ticket. He's not looking to swipe right. He's looking to swipe out the member for Maranoa, Mr. Speaker, is what he's trying to do. But they're trying to betray the member for Maranoa, but what they're really doing is betraying people in rural and regional Australia, because people in rural and regional Australia are people who pay the price of drought and floods, Mr. Speaker, which will be more common and more severe under climate change. It's people in rural and regional Australia who have the most to gain out of the jobs and investment created by net zero, Mr. Speaker. That's what the Albanese government gets. That's what those who will betray rural and regional Australia do not understand.
The Minister's time has concluded. Order. When the House comes to order and there is silence, we'll hear from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and my question goes to the Prime Minister. Will the government rule out ever taxing unrealised capital gains on anything beyond superannuation?
Order. Members on my right. Order. The Deputy... No, before the Treasurer begins. The Minister for Energy and Climate Change will cease interjecting. The Deputy Leader was asked his question in silence, and he was given the courtesy of the House as he deserves. Same courtesy is going to be applied to the Treasurer, and he now has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, to the member for Fairfax for the question on tax policy. As the Prime Minister reminded you a moment ago, this side of the House is cutting taxes for 14 million Australian workers. We cut taxes last year, we're cutting taxes next year, we're cutting taxes the year after, and that means an extra $50 a week on average for Australian workers so that they can earn more and keep more of what they earn, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm asked, or the Prime Minister is asked by the member for Fairfax to rule something out. And I want to remind the House that just on Sunday, not in September, not before the election, not even a few weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, the member for Fairfax said on Sky on the 20th of July, and I'm quoting here, they shouldn't be taking anything off the table, Mr. Speaker. So on Sunday, they shouldn't be taking anything off the table. By Wednesday, we want you to rule something out, Mr. Speaker. Now, we've already got a view. We've already got a view on the policy issue that the member for Fairfax has asked about. We've made our views public when it comes to tax policy. Our priority is cutting taxes for 14 million Australians. We've made it clear that all people will bring all kinds of ideas to the Economic Reform Roundtable next month here in Canberra. But this government, if it's got one defining feature, it's to cut taxes in the context of a more responsible budget. We haven't just done it once. We're going to do it 3 times by the end of this parliamentary term. Now, again, Mr. Speaker, here he comes again, Mr. Speaker. He's not off to a good start. Mr. Speaker, if the member
for... The Treasurer will pause. Just take a seat, please. We're not starting this way. We're not going to just have a free-for-all with everyone piling in and yelling at each other. I made the point, Deputy Leader, that you were heard in silence, and I want to make sure that's for every question that is asked, due to the respect for every member. If you don't like an answer, you simply just can't be yelling across the chamber. We've had all the discussion yesterday and today during the debates about improving behaviour. That's the opposite of everything we've been doing and talking about. Just asking everyone to show a little restraint so we all settle in with our rhythms. And I'm just going to ask the Treasurer also to be careful with his language so he doesn't inflame the situation as well. In general. The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The point I'm making, Mr Speaker, is the member for Fairfax on Sunday said rule nothing out. By Wednesday he couldn't stick to the same position. This is a government which cuts taxes for all 14 million Australian taxpayers. That side of the House went to the election with a policy to increase taxes on every single Australian taxpayer, and even after doing that, they still went to the election with bigger deficits and more debt, Mr Speaker. So I won't be taking lectures, Mr Speaker, from the Member of Parliament more responsible than anyone for their nuclear meltdown on the 3rd of May.
Give a call to the honourable member for Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government keeping Australians safe through our continued investment in defence and our engagement with our key partners and allies?
The call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
Well, can I thank the member for her question, congratulate her on her election to this House, and it was a joy to join her recently at the Redcliffe RSL. And her question is an important one, as our Defence Force is engaging in its most important exercise, Talisman Sabre 25. At the end of May, beginning of June, I attended the annual Shangri-La Defence Dialogue in Singapore, and about a month ago I represented Australia at the NATO Leaders Summit at The Hague. And be it the Indo-Pacific or be it the North Atlantic, what is clear is that we are living in a more volatile world with increasing challenges, ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. And what this demands of us is crystal clear strategic clarity for our nation. For many years, defence policy in our country was characterised by just doing what we always did, which actually is a description of strategic drift. But from the moment that we came to office in 2022, we implemented the Defence Strategic Review. We handed down the first National Defence Strategy. The second will be handed down in the next 12 months. And this is giving a clear articulation of our strategic threat and the kind of defence force that we need to build to meet it. We need a defence force which will give pause for thought for any potential adversary which seeks to coerce us. We need a defence force which will make Australia's contribution to the collective security of the region in which we live. And that means that we need a defence force with greater capacity to project, a long-range submarine capability, which we are delivering through AUKUS, a more capable surface fleet, a more mobile army, longer-range missiles, and air force which can project from our northern bases. And we are a long way down the track of putting all of that in place. But this has involved significant reprioritisation of the defence budget, difficult decisions, but the consequence is a much greater quality in our defence spend and a much more potent defence force as a result. It has also seen the biggest peacetime increase in defence spending in Australia's history. Relative to what we inherited from those opposite, an additional $58 billion over the decade, $11 billion over the forward estimates, and in the here and now, over the last 2 financial years, defence has spent more on procurement than ever, the bulk of which has gone to Australian defence industry, supporting defence jobs. This government is, amidst all the noise, delivering a thoughtful, sober and serious plan to keep Australia safe.
The call to the honourable member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker, and congratulations on your elevation to office. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. On the 28th of February 2023, the Treasurer said that the Labor's unfair super tax on unrealised capital gains would apply to, quote, around 80,000 people. Does the Treasurer stand by that number?
Call to the Treasurer.
Well, first of all, Mr Speaker, I didn't describe it the way that the honourable member has said. That's the first point. Second point is that when we announced the policy, The expectation was that there would be about 0.5% of people in the superannuation system impacted by what is a very modest change in terms of the impact on individuals, but it would make a meaningful contribution to making the superannuation system more sustainable. That remains our view, about 0.5% of people, and that obviously varies from fund to fund. If you think about the fund that was in the paper today, their expectations at Host Plus is that 57 members out of 1.86 million members would be impacted by the modest changes that we are proposing. Now, as the Assistant Treasurer said a moment ago, we are the big believers in superannuation. We're about strengthening superannuation, and those opposite are about weakening superannuation. And for evidence of that, Mr Speaker, think about the fact that on the 1st of July this year, we completed the journey to 12% compulsory superannuation. That's something we're very proud of on this side of the House. So too are we proud, Mr Speaker, to be paying the superannuation guarantee on government-paid parental leave for the first time ever, Mr Speaker. I shout out the minister here for the work that we did on that in the last term of parliament. Now, part of our responsibility to the superannuation system is to make sure that it is treated in a concessional way, that those concessions are generous, but also that they are sustainable. And after these changes are implemented, there still will be generous tax concessions for everyone in the superannuation system, but for the 0.5% of people with balances more than $3 million, remembering the average retirement balance is about $340,000, Mr Speaker.
The Treasurer will pause. The member for Goldstein on point
Speaker,
of order.
Point of order. I asked a very specific question about whether he stood by a number of around 80,000 people.
The Treasurer did deal with that part of the question. He disagreed with the way that was, and he gave some facts and figures about. I know you're after a yes or no, and I can appreciate that. You can resume your seat. I don't know. Not sure what you're waiting for there. But he's now talking about the policy, so he was directly relevant and dealt with the assertion in your question, the claim you made. So he is talking about the policy. He's not talking about any other tax policy yet, but if he strays into any other territory, be assured I will make sure he is being directly relevant to the question you asked. But he now has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It remains our expectation about 0.5% of people in the superannuation system will be impacted by this modest change. They'll still get very generous tax concessions in superannuation. It will be slightly less generous. For example, someone with $3 million, instead of getting a $14,000 tax break, they'll get a $13,000 tax break for their investment, and so it continues to be concessional. I think the respected financial commentator Noel Whittaker has made a similar point, that it remains concessional in the fund for everyone, but a bit less concessional for people more than $3 million. Now, Mr Speaker, I think what this question shows, apart from the fact that the Shadow Treasurer has already been benched, what this question also shows, Mr Speaker, is that this side of the House cutting taxes for 14 million Australians, that side of the House going to the wall for 0.5% of people in the superannuation system who already have more than $3 million in super.
The call to the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government continue to help ease cost of living for Australians in a responsible way?
Call to the Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, it's a source of considerable pride that we say today that we have a Labor member for Menzies, Mr Speaker. And we heard another unbelievably good first speech from the member for Menzies yesterday. In common with so many of the new colleagues in this place, I congratulate him on his election in a tough seat, and I congratulate him on a characteristically thoughtful first speech in this place yesterday afternoon as well. Well done to the member for Menzies, Mr Speaker. Now, one of the reasons the member for Menzies is here is because this government has maintained a primary focus on helping Australians with the cost of living. We know that Australians are under pressure, and this government has been all about finding the most responsible and meaningful way that we can help people with the cost of living. And getting on top of inflation, making sure that we could keep inflation in the Reserve Bank's target band. That was a huge focus of our first term, and it will remain a big focus in our second term as well, Mr Speaker, because we know that even with all of the substantial and now sustained progress that Australians have made together in our economy, with inflation down, real wages up, unemployment low, continuous economic growth, interest rates starting to come down, people are still under pressure. And that's why we did introduce today legislation that will slash student debt. I pay tribute to the Education Minister and the Prime Minister for the first bill of the 48th Parliament introduced today. But that, as the Prime Minister and as the Education Minister has said, this is just one of the ways that we are delivering cost of living help from this month, Mr Speaker. From the 1st of July, increases to the minimum wage and award wages benefiting almost 3 million Australian workers, an increase to the super guarantee, more paid parental leave and paying super on it for the first time, more energy bill relief, more help for people to get into a building trade, Mr Speaker, cheaper home batteries as well, Mr Speaker, paid prac for students, and also the usual increases to social security payments. In addition to all of that, Mr Speaker, we're cutting income taxes for every single one of the 14 million Australian taxpayers, Mr Speaker. Now, this cost of living help was at stake in the election. It was on the ballot in the election, Mr Speaker, and if those opposite had their way, this cost of living help would not be rolling out into our communities, to our families and in our economy, Mr Speaker. They wanted higher taxes, lower wages and still higher deficits, Mr Speaker. Now, we have picked up where we left off in the last term, delivering this cost of living relief. We know that the people of Australia have put their faith in this Prime Minister and his government. We will work hard every day to repay that faith, continue to help where we can with the cost of living in the most responsible way that we can.
The call to the honourable member for Curtin.
This is a question for the Minister for Communications. In the last Parliament, this government initiated an inquiry into online gambling, which resulted 2 years ago in a report containing 31 unanimous recommendations, including phasing out ads for online gambling. The government hasn't even responded to our report, let alone implemented its recommendations. Since the report, countless more lives have been ruined by gambling harm. Our communities want to see change. Will the government commit to implementing these recommendations during this term?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Curtin for her question and her genuine and ongoing commitment to reform in this area, and I know that's a commitment shared by all of the committee members of that standing committee of the 47th Parliament. And I will assure the member for Curtin that that work goes on. This government has delivered the most significant online wagering harm reduction initiatives in a decade. That's what this government did last term, and that work continues. We take very seriously our responsibility to people affected by online wagering, particularly young people and particularly vulnerable people. And obviously I'm the new Communications Minister. I've been getting my feet under the desk, and as part of that work I have been taking meetings with harm reduction advocates, with the broadcasters, with the sporting codes, to get my head around this and what the pathway looks like moving forward. And I know that the Minister for Social Services and myself have been working together on this, and we are committed to continuing the work of the previous ministers from the first term. And that is very good work, because it was the most significant gambling harm reduction measures in Australian history. We banned the use of credit cards for online wagering. That is so significant. We launched BetStop, which is the National Self-Exclusion Register. We forced online wagering companies to send their customers monthly activity statements to itemise their wins and their losses. We provided direct funding for specialist financial counselling to support people who are affected by problem gambling. We introduced new minimum classifications for video games with gambling-like content. We introduced new evidence-based taglines in wagering advertising. We introduced nationally consistent staff training, and we established mandatory customer ID verification for online wagering. At the end of June 2025, I can give an update to the member for Curtin that BetStop has recorded 44,841 registrations, 39% of whom have chosen a lifetime ban. That is good work, and that work now goes on.
Give the call to the honourable member for Hughes.
Here.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to address the generational housing challenges facing Australians, and how will it progress this work in a second term?
Good question. The call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and can I congratulate you on your re-election as the Speaker of this House. I look forward to 3 more years of a very well-run parliament, and I hope we didn't get things off on the wrong foot, Speaker. Now, Speaker, I am a part of a Labor caucus today which has now heard 9 first speeches of the incoming class of 2025. We are humbled, we are amazed, we are inspired by these remarkable people who join us in this parliament. And I would include the member for Hughes in that who's asked me this question. Now, Speaker, almost every one of these new MPs spoke about housing as a core concern in their electorates and their immense pride at being a part of a government which has such a massive housing agenda. Speaker, the Albanese government is partway through a critical national project. We are implementing a now $43 billion agenda to improve the housing opportunities that are faced by Australians. Last term, we took the Commonwealth from being really a negligent bystander on this critical national problem to being easily the boldest and most ambitious Australian government on housing since the Second World War. We're making it easier for people to buy, we're making it better to rent in this country, and we are building more homes. Now, that has had real implications in our first term for Australians, Speaker. In our last term, 175,000 Australians took advantage of our 5% deposit program, getting into their first home for the first time. More than 1 million households around our country benefited from our 45% increase to Commonwealth rent assistance. About 500,000 homes were built in Australia over the last term. We've got 28,000 social and affordable homes under construction in our country right now. Now, Speaker, in our second term, we'll build on those foundations. We're going to go further, we're going to go faster, we're going to go bigger. Speaker, in this second term, we'll deliver more help to first-home buyers. Soon, every single first-home buyer in this country will be eligible to get government support to get into their first home. We'll build more homes, including 100,000 homes that will be set aside exclusively for first-home buyers with no competition from investors. And we're working with the industry at the moment to address one of the biggest challenges that we face in housing, and that is that it is too hard to build a house in our country today. Now, the Commonwealth has some control over this, and that's something that we're working on towards the August Productivity Roundtable. Now, Speaker, housing is going to be an absolute foremost priority of our government in this second term, and it must be indeed for the whole parliament. Housing is in crisis in our country. Every single one of us is duty-bound to spend our time and energy trying to find real solutions to the problems that we face. My door is open to everyone in this parliament, Speaker, from every party, from every part of our country, to help us work together to make a difference to the lives of Australians.
Call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Prime Minister. Given the Treasurer's refusal in his previous answer to rule out taxing unrealised capital gains beyond superannuation, can the Prime Minister advise the House if taxing unrealised capital gains on the family trust, the family home, is to be considered by this government?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'll give a big tip to the member for Fairfax. The time to run a scare campaign is just before an election, not after one. Not after one. That's the time
Order.
when you stand up and you say, will you rule things in, will you rule things out?
Order.
Because the next election is due in May 2028. What we are going
You said don't rule anything out on Sunday.
What we are going to do,
cease interjecting.
Mr Speaker, because unlike those opposite who couldn't keep a line from Sunday to Wednesday, we on this side have a clear agenda of what we took to the election. It's tax cuts. Right. Tax cuts. You on that side of the House, including the member for Fairfax, took a position to the election, apart from the 7 nuclear reactors that they wouldn't visit. They took a position which was to have tax increases 14 million Australians. 14 million. So it's a bit early. It's a bit early on day one. Day one to start the rule-in, rule-out game that they themselves said on Sunday was juvenile and absurd. They on Sunday, he'll be going to the economic roundtable, and I look forward to him making the sort of contribution that he made to the last term of parliament, which we on this side appreciated, particularly the member here, the Minister for Energy, who's very disappointed. But I'll make this point as well. The last Shadow Treasurer, it was like there was a nuclear force field around the Treasurer asking him questions. The Shadow Treasurer has had 2 opportunities and has failed to do so.
Order. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer?
We might give him a go.
Order. It's not about giving anyone a go. The Deputy Leader is entitled to a point of order and he'll now make it.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And we have had over 2 minutes of a preamble from the Prime Minister on relevance. He hasn't actually answered the question. He has dodged the same question the Treasurer has dodged.
Yeah. Order. See, we're going to need a little work in this front, but you would like a yes or no answer. I totally end that. Order. Thanks, Manager of Opposition Business, for your help too. We just need to... Well, I'm trying to help you. We're just going to make sure the Prime Minister is being relevant to the question he was asked about tax on unrealised gains, and he now has the call.
The policy that we have is the one that we took to the election, and the policy that we have is for lower taxes. The policy that they have is for higher taxes.
Order. 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 When the House comes to order, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, I'm bringing the House to order. So I can hear from the member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to lift child safety in early education and care services?
Give the call to the Minister for Education.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the brilliant member for Bass for her question. A former school teacher, and Mr Speaker, the member for Bass is concerned for children in Tasmania, and her dedication to their future is a big part of why the people of Bass have sent her here. Mr Speaker, Australians right across the country have been shocked and sickened and appalled by the news in Victoria in the last few weeks. A person arrested and charged with multiple heinous offences against children, offences allegedly committed in childcare centres. I've been pretty blunt in the last few weeks, and I will be again now. People have been arrested and convicted for offences like those alleged before. And governments, Labor and Liberal, state and federal, have taken action, but not enough and not fast enough. That's the truth. We have to do everything that we can to ensure the safety of our children when they walk or when they're carried through the doors of a childcare centre. That's why we introduced legislation today to give us the power to cut funding to centres that aren't up to scratch. This is the biggest weapon that the Australian government has to wield here. Australian taxpayers are the biggest funders of childcare centres. We do that through the childcare subsidy, $16 billion a year. Centres can't operate without it. It covers about 70% of the cost of running a childcare centre. This legislation will give us the power to cut that funding off to centres that aren't meeting quality and safety standards. Let me be clear, the purpose of this legislation isn't to shut centres down, it's to raise standards up. But this is also not an idle threat. Mr Speaker, I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition, and I want to thank the Shadow Minister for Education and the Shadow Assistant Minister for Education and your teams for the serious and professional and bipartisan way in which you've engaged with us on this legislation. I mean that. This is what mums and dads watching across the country want of us and expect of us and deserve of us. No party, no government, state or federal, has done everything that we need to do here. That's obvious. But I think everyone here is determined to do what needs to be done to rebuild confidence in a system that parents need to have confidence in. And the legislation that I introduced today is part of that. It's not everything. There's a lot more that needs to be done. And the terrible truth is that this work will never end. But this is an important step in helping to keep our children safe.
On indulgence, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On indulgence, can I thank the Minister for Education for the way that he has engaged with me, with my team and with our Shadow Minister for Education, and reiterate my strong desire to work positively and proactively on this incredibly important issue. I can't think of many issues in my time in this parliament that have made me feel as physically sick as this one has. And I know this feeling is shared by members across the aisle. To consider that these criminals have found their way into our centres and into the lives of our precious innocent children is just appalling. So we do stand ready to continue to make sure that we get this right. The legislation was introduced this morning and we want to examine it closely, as we should. The scrutiny of all members will make better legislation, if indeed amendments do need to be made. But ultimately, I want those listening and viewing today to be confident that this is an issue well and truly above politics. We will all work incredibly hard to get this right.
Give the call to the honourable member for Calare.
To the Health Minister. The rural doctor shortage crisis is devastating for Calare residents. Country people have shorter life expectancies than city people. It's outrageous. The Charles Sturt University School of Rural Medicine opened 5 years ago to train doctors in the bush for practice in the bush, with 37 Commonwealth-supported students. It hasn't been given any more student places since. When will your government take effective action to A, fix the rural doctor shortage crisis, and B, give Charles Sturt University more Commonwealth-supported medical student places?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and the Minister for the NDIS.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Clare. Congratulations on your re-election. Thank you to you and your team for our engagement over the last period of time over what you describe as a really significant challenge of access to doctors in rural Australia. Thank you for the roundtable that you organised of GPs in your community that we conducted together just before the election. I said really from the time I was appointed to this portfolio it had never been harder to find a GP in Australia than it has been over the last several years, and it's even harder again in the bush. I know that as we've been getting larger as a population, older and in many ways sicker, we just haven't kept up with the number of GPs anywhere in the country, but particularly in the bush. As the member knows, there's no single fix for this challenge, which is why we are trying to work right across a range of areas to improve that access, but also that affordability. As he says, we've got to train more young people as doctors in the community, in the rural communities. We know that if they train in the bush, they're far more likely to stay in the bush, which is why we have added CSPs, Commonwealth-supported places, into rural Australia, and we've committed to, in time, 200 more medical school places that will be run through the education portfolio in partnership with the health portfolio, and in due course we'll be making it clear how we put those out for tender. We've also done a range of other things to train more, not just medical students, but post-medical school graduates into general practice. We've got more GPs in training this year than ever before in this country. We want to expand that again, and that includes more in the bush as well. We want to reward doctors who work in the bush, which is why in our first budget some time ago we increased incentives for GPs working in the bush, particularly if they had additional skills in areas like emergency management, obstetrics, mental health and the like. The bulk billing incentives that apply through our bulk billing reforms are higher in the bush than they are in the cities, which is why of the additional bulk billed visits since we put those plans into place, disproportionately that has benefited the bush. And the Minister for Education again introduce very significant student debt relief provisions for medical graduates if they agreed to go and work in the bush as well. But we know that we're not going to be able to train enough Australians quickly enough to deal with the challenges that you have been talking about so strongly, the member for Clare, which is why we're also trying to cut red tape and cut costs for overseas trained doctors in countries where we have a high level of confidence, like the UK, New Zealand and Ireland, to come into Australia, particularly to practice in the bush. In the last 12 months, there's been a 500% increase in the number of GPs from those three countries applying to come here and work in communities like yours.
Give a call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women. How is the Albanese Labor government continuing to deliver for women in this term of government?
Call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Local Government and the Minister representing the Minister for Women.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I congratulate you on, again, your elevation to the chair. And can I thank very much the member for Sturt for the question, with particular congratulations as the first woman to represent the seat of Sturt. I know that you've got your first speech coming up after question time, but I do just want to say to you we are so very proud and privileged to have you here with us. Well, we're making history. We have the first majority female parliament in our history. And you can see from behind me that Labor has been doing the lion's share of that work. We also have the first majority female cabinet, again in our history, and that means more women are in the cabinet room making decisions that impact on women. The Albanese Labor government is absolutely committed to delivering for women and for representing them. The list of achievements are long, and there are many that are started on the 1st of July as well, and I want to talk about some of those. We've delivered even more support for women. We're increasing the national minimum wage and award wages by 3.5% from the 1st of July so that women can earn more. We're increasing paid parental leave to 24 weeks. That makes a material difference, not just to women but to their families overall. We're making sure super is paid on government-paid parental leave. With women holding the majority of student loans, our 20% reduction in HECS debts will also help lower student debt for women. We're delivering Commonwealth prac payments for women-dominated sectors such as nursing, midwifery, teaching and social work. We're also ensuring that aged care nurses, of which the majority are women, will receive their next pay rise in October, all of which is contributing significantly to the record low gender pay gap. And we know that none of this happens by accident. None of this happens by accident. Having women in the room matters with all of our policy initiatives. Our new National Access to Justice Partnership, helping to reduce pay disparity and support frontline services for people experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence. We have a proven track record on delivering better outcomes for women, and our new measures build on those investments from the last parliament. They include over $4 billion for combating gender-based violence. We've secured 10 days paid domestic and family violence relief, and we directed $1 billion to crisis and transitional accommodation. Again, none of this happens by accident. Having women in the room matters, and making sure women are representing across the country also does not happen by accident. You have to purposely do it.
The call to the honourable member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question's to the Assistant Treasurer. Can the Assistant Treasurer confirm how many farmers and small and family businesses will be impacted by the government's superannuation tax on unrealised gains?
Call to the Minister, the Assistant Treasurer and the Minister for Financial Services.
I thank the honourable member for the question. What I can confirm is that the total number of members who will be affected, as the Treasurer has confirmed, is roughly in the order of 80,000. I think when it comes to drilling down into smaller categories than that, it is difficult to ascribe a particular number to particular types of business. But what I can say is that the overall number of funds affected by this is in the order of 0.5% across both defined contribution and defined benefit across the entire category of all members, and that's a very small fraction. And as I've said, it's a very targeted and measured policy which is going to improve the sustainability and fairness of this. This is something which will only affect funds with a total amount of investments within those funds which is significantly higher than that which is required for a dignified retirement. That is significantly higher than the amount that was required for the intended purpose of this policy, going back to its original intent. And can I just reiterate that this is a policy that will see concessional tax treatment for all funds. The amount up to $3 million and the amount above $3 million. All of the earnings will be treated concessionally. So this is something which is very balanced, which is very fair and very reasonable.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitments to help Australian workers earn more and keep more of what they earn?
Call to the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Banks for the question, but also congratulate him on his election and his inspiring first speech this morning. Now, every day since coming into government, this side of the House has been absolutely focused on supporting Australians with cost of living. And one of the key ways we are doing this is getting wages moving again. Yeah. Of course, we have introduced measures that have improved wages for working people, and this has been after a decade under those opposite of deliberate wage suppression. Now, we're now seeing the return of real wages growth, with annual real wages growing for 18 months in a row under Labor. We have reinvigorated the bargaining system, making it easier for employers and employees to make agreements in workplaces, with the number of employees covered by enterprise agreements now at a record high. And of course we know that workers on agreements benefit from bigger wage increases. We've also closed the Labor hire loophole with our same job, same pay changes, meaning some workers are now earning $60,000 more as a result of our changes. Our right to disconnect laws have given workers the right to clock off. A recent HR Institute study found that more than half of businesses reported saying that our changes improved engagement and productivity. Yeah. And we're closing the gender pay gap. We've seen the gender pay gap hit a record low under our government. We've backed and funded a 15% pay increase for early educators and up to a 28.5% for workers in aged care. These workers have been undervalued for too long, and our government values them. Ensuring Aussie workers earn more and keep more of what they earn is a key focus for our government. And we are now delivering on our election commitments. We made a submission to the Fair Work Commission for a real wage increase for our lowest paid workers. Now, the minimum wage earners are now earning $9,120 more a year since we were first elected in 2022. Our government will ban unfair non-compete clauses that are holding Aussies back from moving into better, higher-paid jobs. And tomorrow, I will introduce legislation to protect the penalty rates and overtime rates in modern awards so workers who rely on the safety net will not go backwards. Our government is backing Aussie workers. The Albanese Labor government is focused on delivering on our commitments to build Australia's future, ease cost of living pressures and help Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn.
The call to the member for Clark.
Speaker, my question is to the Deputy Prime Minister representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Deputy Prime Minister, in July, 2 vessels were reportedly docked in Botany Bay with some 175,000 tonnes of petrol from the Jamnagar refinery in India, which uses up to 55% Russian oil. So these vessels effectively carried some 90,000 tonnes of Russian-sourced petrol paid for by Australians, which will help fund Putin's war in Ukraine. Deputy Prime Minister, why are the loopholes in our sanctions so big you can drive a tanker through them?
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Defence and the Minister representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Well, firstly, can I thank the member for his question, and in doing so acknowledge his commitment to the support of Ukraine in its resistance against the immoral invasion by Russia of its territory, and reiterate that our government, and I know the whole of the Australian people, stand with Ukraine in their resistance against Russia. And I was, at the NATO summit, able to meet with my counterpart, Rustem Umerov, to express our support for Ukraine in its resistance to Russia. And he indicated to me, as I know President Zelensky has to the Prime Minister, the deep sense of gratitude that the Ukrainian people have to the Australian people for supporting their cause. In relation to the question of sanctions, sanctioning Russia is a critically important part of what we need to do in terms of supporting Ukraine in its efforts to resist Russia. At that same NATO summit, I announced increased sanctions to an additional 44 people and entities, which now means that in total there are about 1,500 people and entities in Russia which are the subject of Australian sanctions, which sees a significant impact on the Russian economy in areas such as electronics, areas such as energy, areas such as finance. And it is a really important part of what we need to be doing to contest Russia in this moment. But it's not everything, as you know, and we continue to support Ukraine across the board. Since we've come to office, we have had iterative announcements in supporting Ukraine with renewed assistance, and that includes most recently 49 Abrams tanks, the first tranche of which are now in the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces. And we will.
The Deputy Prime Minister will pause. The member for Clark is entitled to a point of order, and he shall take that now.
Thank you, Speaker. On relevance, the question goes directly to the issue of Australia using Russian oil in the production of our petroleum and other fuels.
Yes, that was part of the question, and I'm just going to remind the Deputy Prime Minister, while he needs to be directly relevant, and he is talking about that issue, he has a remaining minute to conclude his answer.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. And sanctions, which is the topic of the question that the member has asked, is an important part of what we are putting in place to stand with Ukraine, and our government will stand with Ukraine. I know the Australian people will stand with the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes for Ukraine to resolve this conflict on its terms.
The call to the honourable member for Deakin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How did the Prime Minister's recent trip to China help to promote and protect Australia's interests?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Deakin for his question, and I know from my visits to his now electorate on many occasions during the last term that he understands the importance that these global relationships can have. And at a time of global economic uncertainty and strategic competition in our region, it is particularly important the way that Australia navigates this uncertainty and manages this competition is critical to both our security and our prosperity. And our relationship with China is an important part of that. 1 in 4 of Australian jobs depends upon trade, and nearly a third of our exports go to one destination, China. Indeed, it is absolutely critical for jobs here in Australia. And we know from the fact that the impediments to trade have been removed, the benefit that that has got, the benefit in repairing and stabilising that relationship. Of course, we have a different political system and different values, but we'll cooperate where we can, we'll disagree where we must, and we'll engage in our national interest. And I'm asked how it will benefit this relationship. And certainly the leaders of some of Australia's biggest companies and biggest employers who accompanied me on this visit certainly know that that's the case. The Business Council of Australia understand. That's why they had a high-level delegation of CEOs and chairs of finance companies, of universities, as well as resource companies and manufacturing sectors, legal and service providers as well. We know that the big iron ore exporters, Fortescue, BHP, Rio Tinto and Hancock certainly understand it, which is why they participated with their counterparts in the Steel Decarbonisation Roundtable, something that could make not just an enormous difference. Ross Garnaut expects it could be worth 3 to 4 times the value of our iron ore exports are today, as well as the most significant contribution we could make to reducing global emissions. The beef producers of Queensland know that this relationship matters. The lobster fishers in Geraldton know that this matters. The rural communities who grow barley know that this matters. Our tourism operators, and we signed a significant expansion deal there, know that it happens. The wine sector, be it in the Barossa or Margaret River or Tasmania or the Yarra Valley or the Hunter Valley, all know that this matters. Australia's relationships in the modern world matter, which is why we need to have a mature and responsible approach to it, and which is why this visit will produce real concrete benefits for Australian jobs and our Australian economy.
Call to the honourable member for Hume.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Prime Minister, the circumnavigation of Australia by armed PLA Navy vessels, which included live-fire exercises without warning in the Tasman Sea, was totally unacceptable and must never happen again. Following his 6-day visit to China, what assurances did the Prime Minister receive from the Chinese President that armed PLA Navy vessels will no longer conduct surveillance and live-fire exercises off our coast?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker, and I thank the new Shadow Minister for Defence for his question. And while I was in China, I saw the Shadow Minister for Defence's comments when it comes to the long-held position that has been a bipartisan position up to now when it comes to the issue of the Taiwan Straits, the fact that the United States has had a long-term position about strategic ambiguity, and that has been done for a responsible reason. But what we saw from the Shadow Defence Minister in his first outing in uttering comments in an area that requires responsibility, requires a national interest, requires the support of our sovereignty when it comes to our decision-making processes, what we saw is a breach. Now, I'm not sure if that's the position of the Liberal Party today or the National Party today or where it is.
Order. Members on my right. Member for Chifley can see interjecting as well. The member for Hume is entitled to a point of order. He'll state it.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. That answer bore absolutely no relevance to the question. The question was about assurances from the Chinese President about whether or not there would be a repeat of the surveillance and live-fire exercises off our coast.
Yeah, the Prime Minister did give a preamble, did give some context, but he wasn't asked about the Shadow Minister's comments. He was asked about his visit, so I'll ask him to return to the question.
I was asked about the visit. I was asked about the defence relationships which relate to China and the fact that we do have strategic competition in the region that we have to deal with. And during that visit, those comments by the Shadow Minister for Defence were entirely irresponsible. When it comes to—
Order. Order. Members on my left.
When it comes to Australia's position, I put forward, as I have publicly, that we were concerned about what occurred earlier this year. I also put forward the response that it was in international waters and in the context which is that Australia participates in exercises in the South China Sea, in the region, in a consistent way, not just Australia. And at the same time, of course, our Talisman Sabre exercises were occurring, but we regularly participate, and not just as a nation-state, but we participate as well with our ally in the United States, but we also participate with other countries in international waters. That is what we do. We comply with international law, and we expect international law to be complied with as well.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Braddon.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Leader of the House. How is the Albanese Labor government continuing to deliver on its legislative agenda to help Australians?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Braddon for the question. There's 150 of us in the room, all of whom faced an election, but only one of us recorded the largest swing in Australia. And congratulate the member for Braddon in that. The legislative agenda for the government has already started, and as the Prime Minister has already referred to in question time, that legislative agenda is different because we have a Labor government. That legislative agenda involved the first bill today being the 20% cut to student debt for students from both universities and TAFE who have student debt, that they will get a 20% cut, which they would not have had. It was at risk as to how the election would go, and certainly the plan from the coalition, the alternative would have been that the first bill was to raise taxes for every Australian taxpayer. Instead, from opposition, their first bill is coming from the member for New England to abolish net zero, which is now there. This continues what we did in our first term. In our first term, issues that were stake in the legislative agenda that went through because we had the Albanese Labor government got wages moving. Because we had the Albanese Labor government, legislation for energy bill relief. These were all opposed. Making medicines cheaper, free TAFE, the urgent care clinics, progress on closing the gender gap. These issues were all at stake, but the principles of the last term, that this would be a government that wanted people to earn more and keep more of what they earn, and that this would be a government where no one was held back and no one would be left behind, is part of the legislative agenda for the Albanese government in its second term. Today, because the government is Labor, we have started the pathway for 20% off student debt. We will go on with legislation to make sure that penalty rates for workers are guaranteed. That will happen because the government is Labor. We will continue to have tax cuts for every taxpayer because the government is Labor. There will be more free GP visits because the government is Labor. There will be even cheaper medicines because the government is Labor. There will be permanent free TAFE only occurring because the government is Labor. There will be more affordable homes. After 3 years where they're kept being blocking by the Coalition and the Greens to stop more homes being built, there'll be more affordable homes because the government is Labor. There'll be more energy bill relief because the government is Labor. You'll have a situation where people will earn more and keep more of what they earn because the government is Labor.
Call to the Prime Minister.
I ask further questions be placed on the notice paper.